The day had come. The aircraft was finally ready. Mark stood beside it, but hesitation gripped him. His hands were clammy, his breath uneven. This wasn't about the plane anymore. Something inside him had changed. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of crashing. He was afraid of failing. Tom watched him closely. "What's wrong?" Mark hesitated. "I don't think I can do it." Tom sighed. "You've learned everything you need to know. You just need to believe in yourself." Mark shook his head. "What if I fail?" His voice was barely a whisper, laced with uncertainty. Without a word, Tom climbed into the cockpit. Before Mark could react, the engine roared to life. The aircraft shot forward, lifting effortlessly into the sky. Mark's heart pounded as he watched Tom navigate the cliffs with flawless precision, loop around the island, and land smoothly. Tom smirked as he stepped out. "It's not the plane, it's the pilot." Mark stared in stunned silence. His self-doubt deepened. He had spent weeks struggling, and yet Tom had done it with ease. Was he really ready? Or had he been fooling himself all along? The next morning, Tom's expression was unreadable. "If you won't take off on your own," he said, "then let's change the stakes." He climbed into an old Jeep and, without warning, accelerated wildly across the airstrip. The vehicle skidded, then flipped violently. Mark's heart nearly stopped. "Tom!" He ran toward the wrecked Jeep. Tom groaned, clutching his ribs. I think they're broken. You have to get me to a hospital." Mark froze. There was only one way. He had to fly. His fear no longer mattered. Tom's life was at stake. With trembling hands, Mark climbed into his aircraft. The engine roared to life. He took a deep breath, focused. As he lifted off, instinct took over. The wind, the turbulence, it all felt natural. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. He was flying. The island shrank behind him. For the first time, Mark felt in control, not just of the aircraft, but of himself. He reached the base, landing smoothly. His fellow pilots ran toward him, stunned. He barely stopped to explain before fetching an Air Force doctor and taking off again. He returned to the island with a flawless landing. Adrenaline pumped through his veins as he sprinted toward the crash site. But as he reached the spot where Tom had been, his breath caught. There was nothing. No Jeep. No blood. No sign of an accident. Confused, Mark turned toward the hut. But it wasn't there. In its place stood a crumbling structure, overgrown with weeds, covered in dust. The hangar was gone too. Only rusted debris remained. The entire place looked like it had been abandoned for years. Mark's pulse pounded in his ears. "Tom!" he called, his voice hoarse. Silence. The wind whispered through the empty ruins. He staggered back, his mind racing. Had Tom ever existed? Had any of it been real? He clenched his fists. It had to be real. It had to be. Trembling, Mark climbed back into his aircraft. His hands gripped the controls tightly, but he no longer needed reassurance. He took off, leaving the island behind. But doubt gnawed at him. If Tom wasn't real, then who had trained him? Who had saved him? Back at the base, pilots swarmed around him. His survival, his flight, his courage, it had already spread. Whispers of his impossible escape turned into admiration. Soon, the officers decided his name belonged among the legends. His photo was placed on the Hall of Fame. Mark stood before the wall of legends, his breath unsteady. His picture now hung beside another, Richard's. He had spent years ignoring that face, dismissing the stories. But now, as he stared, realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. His blood ran cold. Because now, looking at Richard's face, he recognized him. The sharp eyes, the knowing smirk, the weathered, experienced gaze. It was him. It was Tom. Mark stumbled back, his mind refusing to believe. The man who had trained him had been dead for years. A shiver ran down Mark's spine. Was it Richard's spirit? Had his ghost guided him? He would never know. But as he turned away, a strange calm settled over him. He felt it, an unseen presence, steady and watchful. Somewhere, somehow, Richard was still watching over him.